in Christian terminology, we call that person Antichrist. And so this is a foreshadowing of the Antichrist in the book of Daniel. And it's kind of a grim picture, I know. It's called, in Russian they call this picture Последний жид в Винницу, the last Jew in Vinnytsia. And it's a small village in Ukraine. And there's obviously a big pit of Jews that have just been executed, and there's one last one, and they're just about to shoot him. And it's called The Last Jew in Vinnytsia. And the chapters that come after this are just so hard for Daniel to receive the visions, that he's left physically sick after experiencing them. And it's because the suffering that he sees of the nation of Israel that it has to go through breaks his heart. And so these visions that are coming are speaking of a time of absolute persecution and torment for the nation of Israel, and for a man that is going to set himself up as a ruler, initially pretending to be working alongside Israel, but basically becoming their greatest enemy and seeking their destruction. But in the midst of that, there is chapter 9, which offers us basically the hope of God's plan in all of that. It's a controversial chapter. There is actually a warning and a curse against people that would seek to calculate its meaning. In the Talmud it says, "Blessed to be the bones of the one who calculates the end. For they would say, since the predetermined time has arrived and yet has not come, he will never come." And speaking of the prophecies to deal with the Messiah. Chapter 9 is Daniel's prayer for his people Israel. And this was the prayer that he would be praying when this decree by Darius went out that nobody was allowed to pray. And because of that, he was thrown in the lion's den. He's praying for the redemption of his people Israel. He's praying for them to be allowed to return to the promised land. He's studying the scriptures. He's reading prophecies from the Torah, from the book of Jeremiah. He's applying those to his life. As he reads those, basically the angel Gabriel comes to him and gives him a prophecy of 70 weeks. Now the 70 weeks are basically a strange way of saying 490 years, because in our understanding, weeks is a sort of a period of 7 days. In the Jewish understanding, weeks of years is a very common concept. There was the Feast of Weeks in the Jewish holiday. Pentecost was basically 7 weeks plus 1 day, so it was like a week of weeks plus 1 day. So it's a very unusual way of looking at time, but it's a Jewish way. The sabbatical year was counted that way. 7 multiplied by 7, 49 years, a week of years, until the next year, which would be the year of Jubilee. So basically running through all that to get to the interesting part. To break down the prophecy, there's 3 distinct periods. There's 7 weeks and 62 weeks, after which an anointed one will appear and be cut off, not for his own sin, but for the sin of the people. Then there was a time between that where the temple will be destroyed, where people will come and it seems re-establish the temple, and this Antichrist will set himself up. And then there's the final week, in the midst of which will be the tribulation before the end time. And it's fascinating because it's a predetermined time. Josephus says that Daniel was the greatest of all the prophets because his prophecies were given in a time frame in which those things would happen. And so when you work out the maths, Daniel tells us when the anointed one will appear. He tells us when the anointed one will appear and be cut off. And naturally, Christians would consider that to be a prophecy of Christ, of Jesus Christ. The people in Qumran who preserved the Dead Sea Scrolls were anticipating the day when this prophecy would be fulfilled in their own lifetime. The working out of it is pretty amazing. I'll just get the math feed here. Basically, 7 plus 62 is 69 weeks. And then our Gabriel says the moment this prophecy begins is when a decree is given to rebuild the walls of Jerusalem. We know that decree is given in Nehemiah chapter 2 verse 1, and that occurred in the year 444 BC. That's well attested by astronomical calculation. And so 62 multiplied by 7 weeks of years is 483 years. Using 360-day calendar, which was the standard calendar of the ancient Egyptians and Babylonians at this time, we get to 173,880 days. If you convert that back into our years, which are 365 days, get 463.3 years. And so if you work it out, from the decree to rebuild the walls of Jerusalem in 444 BC, it should tell us that when that time is up, that the anointed one should have presented himself and have been cut off for the sins of the people. When you do work it out, it comes to the year 32, but you have to add an extra year to that, because in going from 1 BC to 180, there's no year 0. So there's an over subtraction of the years. So if you do work it out, it brings us up to the year 33. This prophecy was given in the month of Nisan, and so when you work it out, it brings us into the month of Nisan, the year 33. The month of Nisan was the month of Passover. In the year 33, in the month of Passover, a man did indeed present himself to the nation of Israel as the anointed one, very explicitly, and that was Jesus Christ. He presented himself on a feast of Passover as the anointed one who was going to be cut off, not for his own sin, but for the sin of his people. And he did that by dying on the cross, in exact fulfillment of Daniel's prophecy. Startling, amazingly, so accurately. And it's for this reason that the Talmud really forbids Jews to go tampering with Daniel chapter 9, because when you work it out, time has come and passed, and yet they would say the Messiah has not come. I would say that he has come, and he has fulfilled the things that only he could fulfill. The time was there, and Christ fulfilled all those things and many more to the exact year. He did it explicitly, fulfilling a prophecy in Zechariah chapter 9 when he rode into Jerusalem on the donkey. That was a very provocative, messianic thing to do.